All right, this is a Integrated Interventions podcast. I am your temporary host, Dawson Scholz. I am the marketing coordinator here, and the reason I'm hosting is because I wanted to have a guest on that is the host of Integrated Interventions, and his name is Patrick Dundas, Director of Education. So I'm very stoked to talk to him about everything he does here, and Patrick, thanks for letting me host. I'm usually behind the camera, and you don't see my face very often, but here we are. So, Patrick, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to be here. It's a role reversal of sorts.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we've done interviews back and forth because some people might not know this. Patrick has a history of being a radio host in Spokane. Him and I have done a couple shows together, and we riff back and forth. So, yeah. Anyways, Patrick, thanks again, and let's start with just tell us a little bit of what your background and what led you to be the role as Director of Education at Integrated Interventions.
My pathway into education was very much, I feel like, non-traditional. I come from a family of educators, and so initially that was the last thing I envisioned myself doing. I remember growing up, people would say, "You're going to be a teacher just like your dad?" And I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not going to be a teacher. That's not in my future. It's not a pathway that I envisioned. So I went into broadcast, TV and radio, and I did that for about a decade. And then there kind of came a point where I was looking at a career change. And I thought about things that I could be potentially good at, and education was one of those, particularly special education. During the summers when I was going to Washington State University in Pullman, about 8 miles away is Moscow, Idaho. So the University of Idaho and Washington State University are really close together, and people may not realize that. But when you look, like, they're far closer together than you realize.
Oh, it's just a river.
It is.
It's just a straight river. Yeah,
it's just super close.
You could throw a rock to the other side of it.
Yep, 8 miles, and there you are.
Yeah.
And so I worked a part-time job during the summers, working with an agency that worked with adults with developmental disabilities. And I enjoyed the work, and I thought, in the back of my head, that if I were ever to maybe go towards something else, that this is something that I enjoyed and something I could be good at. And then there was a downturn in the broadcast industry in terms of just wasn't a lot of jobs, a lot of opportunities, especially in the Inland Northwest, Spokane and Coeur d'Alene area. And I was looking to go back to school. And simultaneously, I was also working for an agency working with adults with developmental disabilities. So I decided to go back and get my master's degree in education with an emphasis in special education, and continued to work full time and go to school, as well as balancing. It was a challenge too. I think, balancing full-time school, full-time work, and family, and the various aspects in order to make that successful. But that eventually led to me doing my student teaching at Coeur d'Alene High School, and working primarily with the life skills classroom. And I really developed a heart for working with those populations. And there's just students with a wide variety of levels. And so it was a great transition for me, working towards therapeutic education, where my first job was working at a therapeutic boarding school. And that gave me a lot of insight and preparation for my current job. I feel like without working in those environments, I'm not as successful as my current job, as Director of Education. So it's kind of funny, where life takes you. I had gotten to a point to where I was starting to feel the burnout of working in this field. And it's very common too. They say for special education teachers, generally 3 to 5 years. For some, it's far less. I worked with several colleagues over the years that started in special education and then ended up getting an endorsement in something else. Because they loved teaching, but there was just the burnout factor. And I got to a point to where I was even pursuing another line of work. I was looking to go into IT, and I actually took a year off and was working towards getting an associate's degree over at North Idaho College for IT.
Yeah, you've told me that. You've been through a lot of different things. Like you mentioned that you were doing like a fishing show at some point. You've just been all over the place, and doing a lot of radio and just trying to find what really makes you, like what makes you feel like purpose. And
Yeah.
special education is always something that's tough because there is a burnout, and it can make you feel like, I can do this forever, until a couple years later and you go, oh man, maybe it's not for me. So you've definitely gone back and forth and just trying to figure out, how to make this the best possible version of what you want to do in the education world. So yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I'm looking at these questions, so give me a second here.
No, you're good. And it's so weird for me sitting in this seat and like having somebody ask me the questions.
Yeah.
I'm getting my pacing down now, because initially I'm like, wait a second, there's somebody talking to me. This is really weird.
Well, and the thing too is, like, right now I'm trying my best to, we have Julie who is out of frame, but this is a very candid podcast in the sense that I'm making sure that this camera's working, and I'm hoping that one's working, and I'm hoping that the audio's working, because we're kind of just three people in here just trying to make everything work. So here's Julie in the back if anyone wants to know. So this is what we do. Good, that's good. Okay. So that's the beauty of us here at Integrated, is that we're just all doing multiple things at the same time, and we love our jobs and just have fun while we're here. And so for those who may not be familiar, what is Integrated Interventions, and how does the education department fit into the bigger picture?
Yeah, so integrated interventions, there's a lot of ways you can describe what we do. I'd say at the core, we're a young adult transition program, right? Helping people become the most independent versions of themselves, which is the ultimate goal with it.
Yeah.
And education is one aspect of it. There are multiple pillars to what we do for looking at student success. But education, I feel like, is one of those important vehicles. They're all important, but when you bring them together, when they all work with one another to help that person become the most independent version of themselves. And that's going to look very different from person to person, because every student comes to us with a wide variety of goals, and no two students are alike, although there are people that come here that have similar goals. And that gets the challenge too, is being able to come up with a plan that meets that person where they're at in order to help them grow and become that person that they're looking at. And sometimes, the person they become might not be the person that they initially envisioned, because it's really hard to see outside of yourself. Somebody can tell you repeatedly that you're doing great, but until you believe it yourself, it's really hard to make that next step to move forward towards that growth. Growth is hard, as you know, and everybody in this room that's been working in treatment for a while have seen the ebbs and the flows that come along with it. It's definitely not easy.
It doesn't happen overnight.
No, it doesn't happen overnight, but there are sometimes expectations. I feel like external expectations of, look, you're here. It's time to do work. This change better come fast.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work that way. We're working on other people's timelines. I can envision something that looks like change and maybe how we go about it. But the person also has to live that themselves. And so it takes time to get there. And so we are in a position to be able to guide them and help them, but they ultimately have to make the decision that they're going to make that next step forward for themselves.
That's true. That's true. And the funny thing too with you and me, Patrick, is like we've been here for, 7 years. Yeah, maybe even going on 8.
Did you start maybe about 6 weeks before me, or a month, or something like that? It's really close together. There are a few of us that are almost kind of stair-stepped.
Yeah, we've been here so long, and we've moved up. I started as a mentor, and then I went to the night staff, and I became a night float, and then I got asked to be part of the marketing team, and then ever since then, I've been doing, the podcast or the website design or anything like that. But through all of that, I've seen, so many different variables of how students coming in and out of this program, the education side is always very customized for each person, because it's such a, every person's different. You can't just like give them a curriculum for everybody and expect them to know how to do it. So there's a lot of, outside the box thinking that you have to do as an education director. So how do you balance the academic instruction with the skills and the therapeutic support? I know this might be just like going right to next question, but I feel like it kind of fits a little bit with what I was just saying, where you're trying to balance academic instruction, but then also provide the customized life skills that also are involved. How do you guide that with your, not just you, but also the tutors that also work for us as well?
I would say it begins with relationship. And that's the case, I feel like, across the board for our program, for integrated interventions as a whole. We put a lot of effort into getting to know the students we work with and developing those relationships, because without those relationships, the meaningful work that we want to achieve just doesn't get done. Surface level can only get you so far. And when you're working with students, particularly from an educational perspective, that have experienced a lot of failure, whether it is actual failure or self-perceived failure. Sometimes self-perceived failure is even higher. They view themselves as not being able to achieve. They've had roadblock after roadblock. They start to believe the things that they've heard to be truth. I've worked with a lot of students that have come to me and, they'll say things like, I can't learn, I'm not capable, I'm stupid. And there's one particular instance, a conversation that stood out to me where I was talking with a student and they said that. And I said, I don't believe that for 1 second. What I believe is that you've experienced some challenges with education and there's some things that have occurred that have led you to believe these things, but I don't think they're true. And I think over time, you're going to be able to see that we're going to be able to get far past what you imagined yourself capable of. And that's one of the cool things about what we do is we're able to, I feel like, push past the point of comfort. Once you have the relationship, it's a heck of a lot easier. But when a student believes negative things about themselves, there's a lot of repatterning. We have to be able to go back and change those negative beliefs and to be able to move forward with an understanding that, hey, I am capable. Just because I have not been good at something in the past doesn't mean that that's going to be my truth moving forward in everything. But unfortunately, sometimes you got their failures paint a broad brushstroke of what their lives are. And it's our goal is to get back into that and start working with them to repattern and create an outlook that is more reflective of the person they're becoming versus the person that they were. Yeah. And that's a village effort. I give so much credit to the integrated team as a whole, because we have our mentors, we have our therapists, and we have so many other people in between that play such an important role. Without the wide variety of people that are at integrated, our success as an education team isn't going to be the same.
Well, and a big part of that too is that not all of us are the same person. Like, we're not a cookie cutter concept, which I hate the word cookie cutter, but so many people that work at integrated come from so many different paths.
Yes.
And so many different things that they've gone through in life. And so there's so many ways for you to find something that you can relate with a student with. And that's what's so unique with what we do is that, our mentors are able to find a common ground with our students that then translates to our education team that also can find common ground and say, hey, I sucked at reading. I sucked at math too. I've been there. I know what it's like. It's tough, but we can get there, and that just translates to every part of our program. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, in no education session is ever cookie cutter, right?
No, it's not.
You have maybe 2 hours you're working with the student and you have this goal of okay, we're going to get an hour of math done. We're going to get an hour of English done. And then you go and get into it. And then at the end, you maybe got 10 minutes of each subject done,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're mitigating a lot of factors in between. Sometimes those sessions don't go according to plan and you have to be able to meet them where they're at. But when it comes back to the relationship, I've worked with students to where we end up talking about life for 45 minutes.
Yeah. Sometimes that's the best lesson. I remember having a guitar teacher, and this was very long time ago, but all we did was talk because he just wanted to know me, and we didn't play any guitar. But guess what? I learned more from those sessions than I did from actually learning how to play guitar, because it was about learning to be a guitar player and have not feel like you suck. Like it was just all this weird stuff. And
So there's psychology too.
it was
to
the
being a
psychology,
musician.
but I love talking to people, you know, and I really respected the fact that he was a great guitar player, but he just wanted to make me feel comfortable playing the guitar and not feel like I have to be the best or, you know, all of this stuff. But that's the beauty of teaching, is that you sometimes spend more time developing just talking to someone and like making them feel comfortable. Because then once you get comfortable, then you can actually teach. And that's the back and forth that you have to do with certain people.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's where the real work is done.
it's true.
Is once you get beyond that surface level.
Yeah.
And especially when you're getting to know someone and you may not feel as comfortable, but when the student feels comfortable, I feel like the teacher, you're going to be able to really excel more. That teacher student relationship where you see the growth, you also see it in the abilities that come out of that with the student growth.
Yeah. 100%. I feel like Patrick and I just like could talk for hours about this stuff.
Oh, we could easily talk for hours about a whole bunch of different subjects.
I love how candid this one is. So like, you know, we're talking about strengths and different stories and trying to, you know, personalize the teachings that we do, or the teaching that we do with each individualized student. So like when it comes to the technology and the online learning concept, what does technology or online learning play in helping students reach their goals?
With the students we're working with now, most of their lives, they've known this technology to be in existence. So I feel like a dinosaur when I say these, when I talk about these kind of things, but I didn't get to go onto the internet until I was 16. You know, I'm 45 now. Going to be 46 in a little while. And when I tell people, particularly, you know, younger generations, like 16 years old, like you just sound ancient. But they've always known the internet to be a thing in their lives. And so I feel like it's an easy transition. I've had people ask me that before. They're like, well, online school, how does that work? You know, my student historically has not done well with online school. And the example I like to use a lot is it's not like we take a student, we park them in front of a computer and say, get to work. You know, it's a one-on-one immersive relationship where you're working with another person, working with a tutor in this instance, and you are doing school together. It just happens to be that the online is our curriculum delivery service. We work with Edmentum. It's used nationwide and by thousands of school districts throughout the country. It's even used on an international level as well. But we found a lot of success with that platform. It's basically Plato. So Plato was one of the first online curriculum delivery systems for schools. And Edmentum ended up purchasing Plato at some point. So and for teachers who have been in it a long time, when you say Plato, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I know Plato. But Edmentum has been really great for us, and it's nice that you can access it from anywhere. For some of our students that are more independent learners, they can work on this on their off time outside of school. We have a couple students right now that may go to the library, or if they have internet at their house, they'll work on it from home. And so it really accelerates opportunities for them. It's not just confined to the classroom. Which is, you know, not in a traditional sense. You know, people think classroom are like, oh, teacher, students, teacher talks to the students. Everything is one-on-one. And I feel like for our students that have not done well in traditional K through 12 models, the one-on-one model is the absolute best. And in the world of special education, that's what you go for. You know, small group instruction is tremendous. You know, you can do 1 to 3, 4, 5 students, but the fact we can go one-on-one, I also attribute a lot of our success to this model. But it's really hard for public schools to pull this off. I mean, it's just when you look at the teacher to student ratio,
Yeah.
it's really hard. Unless you're like in a special education classroom, a resource room, you might be able to do that, but not all schools have those resources. And we're fortunate that we can capitalize on this model. And I believe it's also led to our high graduation rate.
Yeah. And you know, it's like public school, you have 30 kids to one teacher, and that's tough. And like you said, highest success rate with the education that we have here. Do you have like a story or something that is, a student story that maybe resonates with you from the past?
I have several, but I will say the ones that often resonate with me the most are when I kind of get the precursor warning of when a student comes in, and I'm working with professionals that are kind of help guiding that transition to our program. And someone says to me, "You're going to have trouble graduating this student. And if you don't graduate them, that's okay. But there is a high likelihood that they don't." I take that as a personal challenge because in my mind, I'm like, we're going to get this kid to graduate. And they're not kids; they're young adults. I mean, but to me, they're kids.
I have that problem too. The older I get, the more I call young adults kids, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
they're 20. Like, stop doing that.
As a guy in his mid 40s, I think of 18-year-olds. They're almost like kids.
Yeah.
And I have a 16-year-old, so you think of it in those terms.
Yeah.
They feel like they're almost teenagers.
But they're young adults.
They are young adults
at the end of the day.
And in this particular situation, we were able to graduate this student with a high school diploma. I've also had a few come through our doors that they left with GEDs, but similar situations where I was told before that you're likely not going to get them to graduate. And we've been so fortunate up until this point that every student that's crossed through our doors has left with a high school diploma or a GED. And I also realized too, at some point, that might not be the case, but our track record up until this point is pretty darn stellar. And that goes to the program as a whole. I want to give, shout outs to all the various people in our program that make that happen. Because if there wasn't a mentor to wake up the student and work with them to get them here, we were not able to achieve what we're able to. And that just goes to all the moving parts and pieces of the integrated machine. That's a weird thing to say, I guess, a machine. But I look at us as an organization, well-oiled. We do a lot of things well. And working together as a team is one of those, and all the various parts that it takes to get a student where they need to go.
Yeah, and a big part of our program, as staffing goes, is communication is probably
Huge.
the biggest. I would say the biggest thing. If you are not good at communication, you kind of struggle here. Not students, but staff, because we are all constantly talking with each other, and if someone is not communicating, it's just communication is so key with keeping everything, like you said, oiled and in a good momentum spectrum in that sense. I don't know if that was worded right, but you get the point.
Well, when you're working with people, a lot of things can change quickly.
Yeah.
And having to, have your head on a swivel, it's just, say a football term, of like being constantly aware.
Yeah.
Because if, you turn your back or you're not paying attention, something could change quickly.
Yeah.
It could be potentially detrimental. And working in the field of mental health and working with some of the young adults we work with, there are a lot of challenges present, and just being aware that change can happen at any moment. And for some of our students, change is really hard.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't realize that just the transportation of a student from a house to the office to do tutoring is a huge part of their day, in the sense that to us, it's just driving a car. To them, it's changing their entire environment that they're very used to, and it's jarring for them to come into a different environment and then work on something they probably don't want to do. Who wants to learn math when they're so used to being in the house that they're used to? There's so many different variables, and every single student is completely different. And it can turn into something where, if you don't have eyes on them at all times, who knows what could happen when they get here. They could go, I don't want to be here. And then all of a sudden, where are they? And so when people have to get sick and call out, then we have to communicate to make sure that we have the staffing that's correct for that student, for that particular session that they have to do. It's tough. And we have a huge and amazing, Laura, our program director, is amazing at being able to staff like out of nowhere and get things figured out. And we have a great team of coordinators that are constantly talking and making sure that everybody's all synced up because, man, mental health, it's a big thing. There's a lot of variables.
And shout out to Laura when it comes to scheduling.
Oh my gosh, she's so good.
She has the ability to not even be in front of the computer.
I don't know how she does it.
And know what the needs are of all the houses. You know, we have multiple houses scattered throughout our communities of North Idaho, you know, primarily Hayden and Coeur d'Alene. And you can ask her a question and she was like, well, so-and-so's at this house and this house, we can move them here and we'll be able to make this happen. And I'm just like, man, it's almost like having a constant picture in your brain of knowing what's going on. And so I give her a big shout out because she's one of the best. I've worked with a lot of people in the scheduling side of things, and she is one of the best I've ever worked with.
Oh,
so,
I totally agree. She's amazing.
Absolutely amazing, for sure, in a lot of ways. But for me, I have to have the visual representation directly in front of me when it comes to scheduling. And for those who can do that within their brain, I'm like, man, that's really impressive.
You know, we talk about how, you know, we have tutors and we have a whole team of people that are invested in making sure that our students are in good care and able to come to tutoring and get their education. However, there's something that comes after just graduating high school with you guys, and that's dual enrollment and college and all of the other things that come with that. So maybe explain a little bit like how I'm blanking on this, but it's okay. Post-secondary, is that what it's called?
Yes.
See, I'm not the education guy, so I'm learning. As I always forget that word.
Education after high school.
Yeah, yeah. So explain a little bit about that.
One of the cool things that has happened for this school year is being able to work with North Idaho College. We've had several students go to NIC, but this is the first time that we've been able to work with them to establish a dual credit relationship. So our students can take, you know, they're going to high school, but they're getting high school credit by taking college classes. And that can be on campus or that can just be online. But we have our very first dual credit student this semester, and they're just doing one online class in English 101 class. But it's really setting the stage because we're excited for spring semester in January. They're going to be able to take at least one of those classes in person. And that's a really great experience because they get to learn the ins and outs of a college campus. Because at its core, the services are going to be the same. The campus may be larger. There may be more students where if they go somewhere else. But with NIC, they're able to learn the ins and outs of like, where is the Writers Center? Where's the Math Tutoring Center? What's over at the Student Union building? What are the things that are offered to me there? How do I get set up with disability support services? And for a lot of students we work with, accommodations are commonplace for their high school and their college experience. We work with a lot of students who are on IEPs. And so there are no IEPs in college, but you do have the opportunity to have accommodations. And to be able to establish those can be critical for student success, depending on what avenues that they're having challenges with, you know, whether that's learning difficulties or learning disabilities. We've had students, you know, that struggle with anxiety in a classroom setting. So maybe they need breaks or, you know, it really depends. You know, they're putting together a set of accommodations that's going to help that student be successful. Where's the library? You know, some of the things that that you might take for granted. Definitely for me, you know, I just kind of learned things on my own when I was a student. But you know, for some, they need that extra help and support.
Well, and when I went to NIC, I actually had a lot of anxiety not trying to navigate like the first day of school, trying to like make sure that I knew where to go and park, make sure I had my parking pass, make sure I knew where the sub was. Like it was a whole thing. And for some people that can be really, really tough to have campus support of someone kind of doing their homework and knowing where all that stuff is incredibly, makes you just feel so much more at home and comfortable. And it's a lot more important than people think.
Well, and being able to cultivate the confidence to be able to do that. We work with a lot of students that may have the academic ability, but there are other aspects that contribute to them having trouble being successful in those environments.
Yeah.
And so we can put together a plan that's going to meet them where they're at and help them become successful. And it's, it varies from person to person, but I've seen a lot of really cool things with, they've started out at North Idaho College and then they end up, maybe back home or going to the state college or whatever collegiate environment they envisioned. But, we're also helping people establish career paths that beyond traditional higher ed too. NIC has a lot of great vocational programs. We work with students who maybe want to get into auto repair or collision repair, or they want to become a plumber or an electrician, or maybe they want to go into some kind of med tech type program. They want to maybe be a dental assistant or work towards becoming a dental hygienist or a nurse, or there's so many different pathways, right? I always go back to the strong interest inventory being an important piece of what we offer. And we work with North Idaho College and their career services to be able to help facilitate those. Essentially, it's an inventory that you take that'll ask you, do you like this career or do you like that career? Do you like working in an office or would you rather be out working with your hands, in all kinds of different scenarios? And then it puts together this really great report that prioritizes the things that they're interested in and the things they're not interested in. What are the careers that you would be good at? Maybe these are the things that you should stay away from based on what you were experiencing in this, when you filled out the report. It's a pretty cool thing for sure. And it's part of the Myers-Briggs family, which is found its way into education for a long period of time. But the strong interest has really helped our students as well. And it's really helped them figure out some things they never would have thought of, as a potential career path.
Yeah.
And then that can help us steer them towards the right pathway for them. There's just so many cool opportunities, and I'm fortunate that we get to work with North Idaho College. I consider it to be one of the crown jewels of our community.
Patrick, thanks so much for chatting with me about this stuff. I think you're always hosting. You don't get the love because no one really knows the back end of all the stuff that you do. And I know it because I've worked with you for so many years, but I think it's important for, the parents and students and anyone else interested in what we do to understand that there's a huge educational side to our program. And so I really appreciate you letting me host. Did my best. And I am excited to maybe do this again sometime. So
I think it would be fun. I do like being on the other side of it. Initially, I'm like trying to wrap my brain around it, because I'm like, this is just so different for me. But I also want to say too, I'm incredibly fortunate and blessed as an employee here because I get the opportunity to work in the marketing department and kind of coming from a broadcast kind of television radio background, the fact that I was able to even host a podcast or be a part of a team and then be able to utilize some of those skills I had acquired over the years has been an amazing opportunity. And so I'm thankful to be able to work with you and Julie. And I also want to give a shout out to Terry and Angela Edelman as well for their vision of a program and being the brain trust behind what we do here.
Yeah. Totally.
And I'm always thankful for everything that they've done in order to cultivate a program that we have and all the great things that have come as a result of this program. Integrated Interventions is definitely my favorite place I've ever worked.
Yeah.
And,
I agree.
I always want to give a shout out to all the moving pieces, or everything that is integrated.
Yeah.
And I'm going to leave something out and I'm not going to thank somebody. And I apologize for that because there's just so many great people.
There's so many people. I mean,
that make this work. Yeah. But the fact that I get to wake up and come to this company on an employment level, I'm blessed.
Yeah. And here we are on a Friday. The leaves are turning. We're in Angela's room. She let us use her office, and that's chilling
different.
In the back, and we're just having a good time. So,
it's a different location.
Yeah.
For those who have watched our podcast throughout the years, we generally utilize a space in our office called the Idaho Room, and so it's cool to change up locations a little bit.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky and blessed to be able to do this. So, with that being said, thank you so much for joining. This has been the Integrated Interventions Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.